I would like to call the August 12th, 2026 City Council regular meeting to order. Would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Carey,
Present.
Chilson,
Present.
Hutchings,
Here.
Nelson.
Aye is requested an excused absence.
Thank you. Parker, Wackler,
Present.
you have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda? Ms. Hutchings,
Make a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda as presented.
may I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Are there any changes to the agenda or consent agenda? Are there any public comments? Whoops, would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
July 8, 2026 City Council meeting minutes. Action Memorandum 2026-018 requested for an excused absence from the August 12, 2026 regular City Council meeting, sponsored by Mr. Nelson. Action Memorandum 2026-019 request for an excused absence from the October 14th, 2026 regular City Council meeting, and that has come to you from Ms. Parker. That is your consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on any of the items just read by the clerk? Anyone here in the audience wishing to speak on any of those items read by the clerk? Seeing and hearing none, it's back before the council. Having no one wishing to speak, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda is be back before the council. Are there any council objections to approving the agenda and consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none, the agenda and consent agenda are approved by unanimous consent. Next item on the agenda is number 4, presentation with prior notice, and the Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District Housing Report being presented by Andy Wick. And Mr. Wick is on the Zoom.
Hi there. Let me get my screen shared up here for you guys. One moment. Well, hello and thank you to Mayor Whitney and members of the City Council for the opportunity to present today. My name is Andy Wink with Wink Research and Consulting, and I'm here representing KPED tonight. I've got a brief presentation for you about the Soldotna area housing market. Most of the information covered comes from our recent housing assessment report, but I've got some new numbers too. So since time is short, let's get into it. The Peninsula has been one of Alaska's fastest growing areas over the past 15 years. However, the city of Soldotna is lagging behind most other communities in the borough. Population actually declined since 2023. Soldotna's population fell 2.2% in 2025. And for context, the borough-wide population increased by about 0.5% year over year. So obviously population trends have important impacts on the local housing market. In general, declining population suggests there's more housing supply opening up in Soldotna. However, we have to remember that each year a certain percentage of the housing stock essentially ages out of being inhabitable. The greater Soldotna area, including Ridgeway, Californsky, Sterling, and Funny River, has generally seen more young families moving into town than moving out. It's kind of what that graph there shows. However, the net number of new families moving into town has shrunk since 2020, and it's now pretty close to being in balance. This could suggest a lack of available housing necessary to house more new entrants. As you'd probably expect, the age of new residents tends to be younger than those who exited, and this includes births and deaths. In terms of turnover, about 10 to 12% of residents each year are new to the greater Soldotna area. Like I said, that includes births, but roughly 90% of new residents each year were people who moved there, not babies born. So this turnover has, also has important ramifications on the housing market, because it's not just about how a population is changing over time. Of course, it's also affected by how much turnover there is. So how is the local economy doing? Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of real-time data at a community level, but what we can see is that growth in taxable spending lagged behind some of the other borough communities in 2025. And the data we have in 2024 shows the pace of resident wage growth generally lagged behind other areas as well. It's certainly possible that some of this is due to federal budget cuts, but on the plus side, the area's medical sector does provide a lot of jobs and has generally been growing. If you haven't read our full housing report, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's got a ton of actionable intel for local residents and local leaders. The report provides case studies explaining how other areas have confronted similar housing challenges. It has a huge list of assistance programs and housing support resources, as well as lots more. The report is on KPED's website. It's a little bit buried, or you can just Google 2026 KPED Housing Assessment, or ask the city clerk for the link, which I sent earlier today. So this is my housing stock slide. And Soldotna's version is a bit more lopsided than the boroughs, but it has a lot of the same themes. About 90% of the city's housing units are single family homes, and about half of those were built in the 70s or 80s. There are 35 apartment parcels in the city, but the borough assessor rates 16 of them in poor condition. So the small multifamily stock that exists is also pretty old. Mobile homes, one of the lowest cost housing options, has fallen by about half since 2016. Though I will note, getting data on the number of mobile homes is not as exact as what the assessor's office has told us. So you can kind of take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Housing prices in the Soldotna area continue to trend upwards. Different realty sites show slightly different information, whether it's based on a model of home values or the median of sale prices. But the ones that I reviewed basically suggested that prices have continued to go up in 2026. Soldotna area homes tend to be a bit more expensive than those in Kenai, but the cost per square foot is about the same, and the homes in the Soldotna area tend to be newer than those in Kenai. So I think that explains a lot of it. So I wanted to highlight a case study that's covered in the report, and I think I chose Bozeman. I think it's a good case study for Soldotna area residents to consider. From 2018 to 2022, Bozeman's population really boomed, and home prices almost doubled. So what Bozeman did is they used zoning reform, development incentives, and tax incentive financing to successfully expand its supply of affordable housing. However, I want to make two honest caveats here. This took years for them to do, and it also took a lawsuit. And they had the benefit of state-level housing reform that allowed the city to rezone parcels without approval from local residents. So, the trends that I think really compelled or forced Bozeman to act are probably more extreme than those facing Soldotna. But I think it offers a really good example of what proactive, growth absorbing housing development can look like, for better or worse, I suppose. And residents can, weigh that versus a passive approach that lets the market decide. So, I want to be clear, there's no objectively right answer here. I think Soldotna City Council has taken very pragmatic steps to address its housing challenges. The case studies in the report, they're simply meant to provide examples of what other areas have done. And I think local leaders and residents can decide if they want to copy all, some, or none of these ideas. So, if zoning reform isn't appealing, there's other strategies to consider as well. So just with, the minute or two that I have in my time here, just to kind of recap, the population in the Soldotna area has lagged a little bit behind other borough communities in the past couple of years. The economic growth looks a little bit less as well. but the housing market appears pretty firm. So I think this would all suggest that, supply is pretty tight. But of course, there are things being done to address that. And, we'll see where it goes from there. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond to those.
Mr. Carey.
Thank you. I was wondering on the computation on wage growth, since again, going down, I'm wondering, how is that computed? Could you give me a general sense?
Sure. So what we did there, and I can send you guys the kind of the data on this, but I asked the Department of Labor to look at resident wage growth and really look at residents that were coming into the area and going out. And so this is the Soldotna area, which includes those other communities. So what we did was we looked at, okay, how does the resident wage growth compare year over year? And in 2024, that was it didn't grow as much as some of the other areas. Yeah, although that could have been because there wasn't, as much resident growth either in terms of the number of folks.
So, kind of,
Go ahead.
so I want to be sure I'm understanding wage growth. Is that the growth in the wages of the people in Soldotna that are making, or is that a different term? What is that wage?
Sure,
growth?
that's a good question, and let me kind of go back to that slide there. So that year over year resident wage growth, it's not an average growth per worker. It's a total wages in that area from year to year, from 2023 versus 2024. And so it's not to say that the average workers' earnings went up or down by that percent. You see what I'm saying? It's talking about the total amount of wages earned in the area.
So let me ask, and again, I'm trying to be sure I've got the term right. So would it be appropriate that if there were more retired people living in an area as compared to those who are again, with jobs that are growing, that in general, a retired person's wage is not as likely to be going up as someone who, I'll say more traditionally, is working? Do I have comparable terms when I'm speaking of wage growth? Would retired residents be fit into that overall computation of growth of wages?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And so what the Department of Labor gets data on is people that are employed in wage and salary jobs. So that if they were getting Social Security income or other retirement income, that wouldn't show up. If they had a part-time job, that would. But again, it's kind of like in 2023, all the wage and salary earnings of residents compared to what that looked like in 2024, just at a total level. And I can go back and look and see what it looks like sort of per average worker, because of course that's important too. But when we're thinking about, is there more money coming into the community? Is there more money being made in the community? Because that's going to translate to all the multiplier effects. That was kind of why I chose to focus on that, not just for Soldotna, but for other city council meetings I've been giving the last couple of weeks.
Excellent. I thank you very much. And, geographically, we're such a small area. And fortunately, there are many more of us who can stay here, again, past our formal working years, although we're still working, that are, again, older people, we can stay here. And so again, I could see where that wage growth number might be down, quality versus quantity. Thank you.
Anyone on the council have a question? Mr. Chilson?
Thank you. So as part of this analysis, was there any data gathered on the type of housing units? And specifically, what I'm looking for is owned versus long-term rental versus short-term rental, specifically what the makeup would be in the Soldotna area, and if there's any potential trending data with that composition.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to find it because I've got the report here. But we did have some information on rental percentages in the report. Let's see if I can find that particular table. Right. So the Soldotna area, you know, in the report, we term it as potential short-term rentals. But really what you know, there's not great data out there to say, here's all the short-term rentals across the peninsula. So what we have to do is we have to look at, does the resident of a parcel in a house match up with the owner's residence? And if it doesn't, then you've probably got a situation where someone is renting that, maybe long-term, maybe short-term. So Seward had the highest percentage of rentals versus all their housing units, and that was 26%, whereas Soldotna was at 13%, and the borough-wide total was 8%. So, you know, it's much less common, I'd say, in the more outlying rural areas that you'd see rentals short-term or long-term. But Seward and Homer were definitely kind of leading the way, and Soldotna was, you know, just behind Homer, I guess. Homer was 16% of all their units.
Okay, so given that
Someone else living there besides the person that owned it.
term, do you have any trending data with that, or is it just kind of a point in time statistic?
That's a point in time, and we, you know, I think it could, yeah, I could go back and look. It just requires, you know, trying to get historical assessment data from the assessor's department, and you know, you have to go through all the parcel listings in the borough. So it's, I think it's about a 60 megabyte Excel file. It's pretty huge just for 1 year. But yeah, that's a great question, and I think we can look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Vice Mayor Parker?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Thank you, Mr. Wink, for the presentation. I noticed in here you used the term Soldotna area. When you did this, did you keep this to the city limits, or was there areas outside the city that were also included?
Yeah, so I tried to, I mean, I realized that when you're talking about the Soldotna area, that's very different than the city. And so anytime in there you see area, we're talking about the larger area with the outlying communities. We don't always have data on just the city. I tried to kind of zero in on that as much as I could. The migration data that I mentioned, that is the larger area, which includes about 22,000 people. So of course, much more than just the city limits.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, within our city limits of 7 square miles, we've got less than 4,500 people. So you said about 22,000 within this Soldotna area were included in this.
Right. And, you know, depending on the data set you're pulling from, it would be nice if it was always the same boundary lines. It's not always, unfortunately, but at least in the slides here and also in our report, we tried to make the differentiator there, you know, area versus city of Soldotna.
Right. No, I just wanted to make that differentiation because we talk about the Soldotna area, and even though the city provides specific services, we also provide those services to the area, and we're very happy to be able to do that and provide these services to the area. I know one of the biggest factors affecting housing, apartment growth within the area here is the ability within the city limits to extend water, sewer to those areas where there's potential for growth, but just the cost to be able to do that. And there's no programs to be able to assist with that. So that's a big drawback.
Yeah, that's one of the key challenges, and I know we heard that from a lot of the communities on the peninsula. So, you know, some of the other cities are trying to do some things about that. There are a few programs out there that, you know, I think can provide loan financing and that sort of thing. But absolutely, anytime you're talking about an area where there's not as much population, all that infrastructure cost just gets really high and really prohibitive in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Again, thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the council? I do have one quick one. When you did the survey for the multi-unit availability, when was that done? Because we've had, right now in progress, quite a few new apartment complexes going in.
I think that data was from 2025, I believe. It was either 2024 or 2025.
Yeah, because there is at least two very large 12 and 24 unit complexes that have just in the process of being completed now, plus a number of duplexes.
Okay, and that's great. And the frustrating thing with the that comes from the assessor's database data set, and they don't say how many apartment units are in each parcel. It's just, it gets coded as this building has more than 5 units, and that doesn't, you could have one with 50 and one with 5, and they're counted the same, unfortunately. So that did kind of bug me a little bit, but there just wasn't a ton we could do about it to really count units.
Okay, thank you. We'll
You
move
bet.
on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comments and presentations. Are there any members from the public who would like to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? Anyone here in the audience wishing to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, Assembly and Legislative Reports, and I see no representatives from the borough or the state here or online. So next item on the agenda is number 7, public hearings. And the first public hearing is Ordinance 2026-020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $3,000 in the general fund for a donation received from the Soldotna Library's Friends, introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to enact? Mr. Carey.
Mr. Mayor, I move the adoption of ordinance 2026-020.
May I have a second, please? Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As stated, it is a donation from the Friends of the Library, and we thank them for their donation. The funds will be used as follows: $500 to help maintain Story Walk at Parker Park, $500 to support ongoing early literacy programs such as 1,000 books before kindergarten, $500 to support the library's creative aging program, and $1,500 to support the 2027 summer reading program.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, which is ordinance 2026-020? Anyone here in the audience? Seeing none, and we have no one on the remote. Having no one wishing to speak, the item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Seeing none, are there any objections to enacting ordinance 2026-020? Seeing and hearing none, ordinance 2026-020 is approved by unanimous consent. Next item on the agenda is ordinance 2026-021, adopting procedures regulating unsafe and disruptive conduct at public facilities, introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to enact? Ms. Hutchings.
Make a motion to enact ordinance 2026-021, adopting procedures regulating unsafe and disruptive conduct at public facilities.
May I have a second, please? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Jolson. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did write out my reports just so that I could cover all the bases, so I apologize for the length. This ordinance is intended to establish a clear and consistent process for addressing unsafe and disruptive conduct at public facilities. The need for this ordinance came from taking a closer look at what process the city currently has in place if we are faced with threats, harassment, or conduct that materially disrupts city operations. Alaska law provides municipalities with authority under certain circumstances to trespass an individual from public property. What became clear to us, however, is that having the legal authority to take action and having a good administrative process for exercising that authority are two different things. The city does not currently have a formal process that clearly establishes how that type of situation should begin, who is responsible for making decisions, what documentation is required, how a restriction should be tailored, or what rights an individual has once a notice is issued. I believe those questions should be answered in policy before we are faced to having to make those decisions in a difficult situation. Trespassing someone from a public facility is a significant action, and it should never be taken lightly. Public facilities belong to the public, and access to government is important. At the same time, our employees, elected officials, volunteers, contractors, and members of the public should be able to conduct business in city facilities without being subjected to unlawful threats, harassment, intimidation, or conduct that materially interferes with governmental operations. I also want to be clear about what this ordinance does not do. It is not intended to shield the city, council, or employees from criticism. Public employees understand that criticism comes with public service. The ordinance specifically protects lawful speech, criticism of government officials, peaceful participation in public meetings, and other constitutionally protected expression. This ordinance is about conduct, not viewpoints. The ordinance focuses on identifiable behaviors that threaten safety or materially interfere with governmental operations. Examples include repeated threatening or harassing conduct, disorderly behavior, refusal to comply with lawful safety directives, damage to public property, or conduct that disrupts public meetings or city operations. Restrictions can never be based simply on what someone is expressing. Just as importantly, the ordinance establishes safeguards. Any trespass notice must be tailored to the circumstances and identify the facilities affected and the duration of the restriction. It must also address continued access to essential governmental services and public meetings. The individual receives written notice, has an opportunity to appeal, and the city must maintain documentation supporting its actions. I worked closely with the city attorney on this ordinance because I wanted us to have a thoughtful process that balances two equally important responsibilities: preserving the constitutional rights of the public and providing a fair and consistent way to protect employees and others and maintain safe, functioning public facilities. Hopefully, this is a process we rarely need to use, but if in a difficult situation does arise, I believe it is much better to have for the city to have a clear, fair, and transparent process already in place than to be trying to determine the process while we are in the middle of the situation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, which is ordinance 2026-021? Anyone here in the audience wishing to speak on ordinance 2026-021? Seeing and hearing none, having no one wishing to speak, the item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Ms. Wackler?
Turned off. I was just, hold on. Okay. I see this as something that's necessary to protect our staff. We've had situations in which they felt unsafe, and I think that creating an ordinance like this to make people feel safe at work is wonderful. I just had one light item in definitions that I thought could be misconstrued as ambiguous or maybe could be perceived as trying to limit speech. And that is under definitions. Under 1, it says disrupting, disturbing, or impeding a public meeting when speaking longer than the time limit, when being unduly repetitious, when discussing or presenting irrelevant matters, or similar unreasonable behavior that prevents the city from accomplishing its business in a reasonable, efficient manner, or when the behavior interferes with the rights of others. I propose that we remove when being unduly repetitious, when discussing or presenting irrelevant matters, or similar unreasonable behavior. Similar unreasonable behavior is pretty ambiguous, and when it comes to the rights of people being able to speak, I want to make sure that there's no ambiguity there. Also, we don't limit people from speaking on a specific topic when they're coming here. I don't want anyone to read this and feel like they can't come in and speak about any topic at any time, because this is a platform where they should be able to do so. I know that the borough did make some changes to their public speaking, where you can only speak about topics that pertain to things that they can do something about. Do we necessarily, are we ready to change that? Do we want this to become a soapbox? Maybe not, but I also am very hesitant to put into our code something that could be perceived as limiting someone's ability to speak on any matter.
Are you proposing that as an amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so could you make a motion and make sure we,
How should I state this? I make a motion to amend specifically this section. So how would I state that? Section B,
You're amending by deletion.
amending by deletion, section B, line 1, specific words, when being unduly repetitious, comma, when discussing or presenting irrelevant matters, comma, or similar unreasonable behavior that prevent the city from accomplishing its business in a reasonable, efficient manner. Or,
Second?
so you want everything that's up there on the board, is that?
yeah, I think that would make sense. Let me reread it and see if it makes the limited time limit when the behavior interferes with, yeah, correct.
Okay, and I had a second from Mr. Carey. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote on the amendment to the ordinance 2026-021.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Hutchings,
Yes.
Wackler,
Yes.
Carey.
Yes.
You have 5 yes votes.
Okay, the amendment to 2026-021 passed on a 5-0 vote. Any further discussion? Mr. Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be clear that when we're considering any policy that can enact changes in this area, that we're doing our due diligence to make sure we're doing everything to protect people's rights to speak to us. We're not in any way possibly impeding those. So on the matter of trespassing people, I just want to ask a clarifying question to administration. My understanding here is that our city administration already had the legal authority to trespass people from city facilities. What this code would do is actually make it more difficult to do that by enacting very, very strict policies that have to be documented and justified, such as cases of actually threatening the safety of our staff before we can actually take that measure. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, do you mean making it more strict than state statute is, sorry.
More difficult for us to actually trespass people because we have to follow our own internal policies, whereas before, my understanding is you as the city manager had the legal authority to trespass at your discretion. Now we're making that more difficult for you because there are very strict policies that have to be adhered and criteria that have to be met that are determined by us in this policy.
I don't know if I would say it more difficult. This actually provides more of a roadmap to follow,
Okay.
which in my opinion is a safer place to be because of the documentation, the required documentation. So I don't know that it makes it harder. I think it makes it more clear as far as process wise.
But it can't be arbitrary.
Correct. It cannot be arbitrary. Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure we're doing that to protect people's rights to speak to us.
Sure.
Any other discussion? Mr. Carey?
This is a very important subject. And speaking about free speech, and clearly and appropriately, we're trying to separate the idea of an individual or group's conduct as compared to the content of opinions. The reality in this country often is that one's conduct can be a form, an expression, dealing with content. The revolution was certainly not fought just nicely and with courtesy. And by its very nature, revolution often is uncomfortable, to say the least, and much more extreme. And so I appreciate very much that this comes before us. I appreciate very much getting a sense of it. I would hope always that the importance is equally balanced between, obviously, protection of everybody that is here, as well as protecting anyone who comes in here. And again, I believe the words, at least I've heard, that it was very much a part of doing this. We want to be sure that the persons coming in feel equally protected and supported. But I am very aware in expressing opinion, it can be very difficult when we try to cleanly separate the difference between one's conduct and the content. Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. When I first saw this, I had some concern. I understand the intent behind it, and I understand that our employees have been harassed and felt threatened by people in the past and will in the future. But I have a concern about the tone that this is setting. And if I was to redo this, I would put this in a more positive format, and it would be procedures for regulating conduct at public facilities. Why we have to say unsafe and disruptive. The content and the tone of that makes it sound like we're trying to put people into a mold that we want them to fit. And that's what we're not trying to do. We're trying to protect our facilities and our people. So I've gone back and forth between, do I support this? Do I oppose it? I support the intent behind this, to protect our employees and protect our facilities. I don't support the tone that this is setting, that we are as a city and as a city council trying to tell people, if you don't act this way, we're going to be tossing you out. So like I said, I understand the city manager's concern and her intent behind trying to do this. But if I was doing it, I would put it in a positive format, not a negative format, and be more proactive in the process. So I think in the end, I am not going to be supporting this, even though I wholeheartedly support protection and keeping our facilities and our employees safe. Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Chelson.
Mr. Mayor, to Vice Mayor Parker's point, I agree with a lot of the sentiment on that. It's actually very well spoken. I know there's a lot of work that went into this proposed piece of legislation that I wouldn't want to see go to waste. So maybe rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater, we take the good parts of it and rework the parts that are of concern to us. And I would propose maybe we postpone this ordinance for future consideration after we're able to give it some more work and bring it back to the council. And I guess my question to the manager would be, what would be a potential date, maybe down the road later this fall or early winter, and we could potentially bring it back for consideration with some changes and put in maybe in collaboration with Vice Mayor Parker.
So is that a motion to postpone?
Pending feedback from the city manager on a proposed date.
Yes, a proposed date, I'm just going to throw out a date, October 28th.
Okay. That being the case, I would make a motion to postpone this to October 28th to give staff time to collaborate with Vice Mayor Parker and other council members that have concern on this, and we can potentially rework it and bring something back that's maybe taking a softer approach with a carrot and less of a stick.
Have a second, please. Thank you, Mr. Carey. Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing and hearing none, we'll have a vote, roll call vote on the motion to postpone to October 28th.
Chilson,
Yes.
Hutchings,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Wackler,
Yes.
Parker.
Yes.
You have 5 yes votes.
Ordinance 2026-021 is, as amended, is postponed until the council meeting on October 28th. Moving on to the next agenda item is new business, and I think we got that all squared away under the consent agenda. Next item is mayor's council reports, mayor's report and proclamation, and I do have a proclamation here, which I will read. Whereas the Joyce K. Carver Memorial Soldotna Public Library serves as a vibrant community hub, providing welcoming and inclusive spaces where everyone feels welcome to explore, learn, and connect. And whereas the library values our community distinct character and is committed to maintaining programs and collections that reflect all the people in our community, ensuring free, open, and equal access for all. And whereas libraries bridge cultural, ethnic, generational, and economic divides to enrich the quality of life across all life stages. And whereas libraries are essential for developing early literacy and lifelong learning, offering everything from preschool story times to career planning resources that encourage the ongoing development of an educated society. And whereas libraries uphold democracy by promoting civic engagement and the free exchange of information and ideals for all. And whereas libraries assist people in navigating life's complexities through open access to research, information, and government services that enhance productivity and fulfillment. And whereas libraries assist people in navigating life's complexities through open access to research, information, and government services that enhance productivity and fulfillment. And whereas libraries boost the local economy and build a better future by increasing digital literacy and providing critical access to resources, technology, and training for job seekers and entrepreneurs, can never pronounce this word, and students. And whereas the shared resources provided by libraries help households to save money, conserve resources, and reduce waste. And whereas a library card brings the power of information, inspiration, and imagination, providing opportunities to openly explore new ideas, engage in enriching conversation, and nurture a lifelong love of learning. Now therefore, I, Paul Whitney, Mayor of the City of Soldotna, do hereby proclaim August 2026 as Soldotna Library Card Sign-Up Month in the city and encourage everyone to sign up for a library card dated this 12th day of August, 2026. And if our city librarian would please step forward, I will present her with this proclamation. And it's great. Every time I go to one of the Boston Buddies, I'm always trying to post it. And I see you're gonna have a new library card competition with them. So.
Yes, the winners to be announced.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. A little more for our report. The food fight, we finally located the trophy somewhere hiding in Kenai, but it has now been returned to its rightful place here in Soldotna where it belongs. And we being the city of Soldotna and everyone who lives here did a great job on providing food and funding for food. And as a reminder, The Food Bank Soup Bowl event is happening, I believe, August 22nd at the Sports Center, or no, at the Field House. What else do I have here? The city manager, Mr. Chilson, and myself had the opportunity to meet with the chief executive officer of the hospital here a couple of days ago and had a very fruitful and a good discussion on what's going on with the hospital, future growth, things that they need to do there. And I think the city manager pretty much covered that discussion in her report from Friday. You know, the hospital has become a hub of this community. From what it was 40 years ago to what it is today, it's the heartbeat of here. Just as a sideline, how much that hospital has grown. My son broke his leg here when we were visiting in probably late 1970s, early 1980. And the hospital was very small at that time. And because of the break, they didn't feel that they would be able to take care of it here. And we ended up wrapping up this 6-year-old, 7-year-old in a blanket, getting on an airplane, flying back to Fairbanks, and had my cousin meet me at the airport, or met my wife at the airport, and took him to the hospital, where he ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital in a body cast. But that's how much things have changed here in the last 40 years. And it's great for our community. Very proud of the hospital. Another thing on the agenda, the city manager and I had a meeting with the Alaska Council of Mayors yesterday. Some discussion on the upcoming bill that was introduced today by the governor on the LNG plant and what effect that particular legislation would have on Title 29. Unfortunately, yesterday we did not have a copy of that, and I think it was just presented today. So we're going to be doing, we being the Council of Mayors, will be taking a look at that and seeing what kind of a position is going to be taken by the Alaska Municipal League and so forth. And that is all I have. Next item on the agenda is the council's report on boards and commissions, and we have none this evening. And next item, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few items to report. We received information from our federal lobbyists regarding continuing resolution, which is being issued to continue funding for the federal government through December 11th is when the continuing resolution would end. This affects our CDS project, our Marydale Utility Project. Generally, the CDS projects do not end up in the continuing resolution. So we'll continue to monitor that. And as we learn more, I'll pass it along. The WRDA bill, which is Water Resources Development Act, we received confirmation that Senator Sullivan included 2 wastewater projects in the bill. The 2 projects are pH control at the wastewater treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant headwork screw pump project for a total of $1.3 million. The projects are included both on the House and Senate side. The next step is funding appropriation to support the bill, which has not happened at this time. We will also continue to monitor the progress of that process. That's all I have this evening, unless there's any questions.
Any questions for the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is public comments. Are there any members from the public who would like to speak on any item? Anyone here in the audience wishing to speak on any item? Seeing none, we'll move on to council comments. And we'll start this evening with Ms. Hutchings.
No comment.
Ms. Weckler.
I just want to remind everybody that summer's not quite over and we still have music in the park going on. It looks like we might finish up in enough time to go see Noah Richardson. So get out there, enjoy what's left of it. Thank you.
Mr. Carey.
No comment?
Mr. Chilson.
No comment.
Vice Mayor Parker.
I'm sorry, there will be comment. So 2 things. Remember, school will be starting next week. So when you're out and about, make sure to keep your eyes open and aware. And probably there's one young man going, man, I don't want to go back to school. But it's always fun to go back to school because you get to see your friends and people that you hadn't seen all summer. So be safe out there, be safe on the streets. And then the other thing is, recently Kenai Peninsula College got a new director since Cheryl got promoted as chancellor for the University of Alaska Anchorage. And the new director is Gary and Susie Davis's daughter, who grew up here in the area, went to the schools, moved away, but has now come back and will be the new director at Kenai Peninsula College. So we're glad to have Ms. Davis back in the community. And I know her parents are really happy.
They certainly are. And one thing I did forget, August the 18th is primary day. Don't forget to go out and vote. The Soldotna precinct has changed. If you haven't seen the mail, it is now at the Soldotna Sports Center. Fieldhouse, excuse me. Fieldhouse. I'll probably end up walking to the library to go vote because I'll forget by next Tuesday. So, but yes, August the 18th. And next item on the agenda, executive session, and we have no need for an executive session tonight. Meeting announcements, September 2nd, 2026, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at 5:30 PM. And September 9th, 2026, City Council meeting at 6 PM. Having nothing further on our agenda, we are adjourned.
Library was so convenience.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? But it was too soon. Think about. But think about, at least we'll be standing inside instead of out in the snow.
I usually get there at 7, right? They open on my way to work and there's there. It's amazing.
Listen to you.
Like a minute away from my office.